Spiritual narcissism is one of those paradoxes that hides in plain sight. It wears the language of humility, compassion, and enlightenment, but beneath the surface it quietly reinforces the very ego it claims to transcend. It doesn't look like arrogance in the usual sense. There's often no loud boasting or obvious superiority. Instead, it's subtler, more refined, and therefore harder to detect, both in others and in ourselves. At its core, spiritual narcissism happens when personal identity becomes wrapped up in being spiritually advanced, awake, or more conscious than others. The practices that are meant to dissolve the ego, meditation, mindfulness, prayer, self-inquiry, end up becoming tools the ego uses to strengthen itself. The person may begin to see themselves as someone who has special insight into truth, someone who understands life at a deeper level than the average person. And while that might contain a grain of genuine growth, it also creates a quiet hierarchy: the aware versus the unaware, the evolved versus the asleep. One of the most telling signs of spiritual narcissism is the need to be recognized for one's spirituality. This doesn't always show up as direct self-praise. Often it appears as subtle signaling, talking frequently about personal growth, referencing spiritual concepts in everyday conversation, or framing one's identity around being a healer, empath, or awakened soul. There's an unspoken desire for validation, to be seen as wise, calm, enlightened, or morally superior. Another aspect is the avoidance of uncomfortable truths under the guise of positivity or higher perspective. Someone caught in spiritual narcissism might dismiss real emotional struggles, both their own and others, by saying things like, "Everything happens for a reason," or "You just need to raise your vibration." While these ideas can sometimes be helpful, they can also become a way to bypass genuine empathy and emotional depth. This is often called spiritual bypassing, and it allows a person to avoid confronting their own shadow, the messy, imperfect, human parts of themselves. Ironically, spiritual narcissism often grows out of sincere beginnings. Many people turn to spirituality during times of pain, confusion, or searching. They may have real breakthroughs, moments of clarity, peace, or connection that feel transformative, but the mind, always looking for stability and identity, can latch onto these experiences and turn them into a new self-image. "I am someone who has figured things out." From there, the journey subtly shifts from exploration to preservation, protecting that identity instead of continuing to question it. There's also a distancing effect. Someone deeply identified with being spiritually evolved may struggle to relate to others in an equal, grounded way. Conversations can become one-sided, with advice offered too quickly or perspectives imposed rather than shared. There can be impatience with people who are struggling, judged, internally or externally, as less aware or less developed. This creates a quiet isolation, even if the person believes they are deeply connected to others. What makes spiritual narcissism particularly tricky is that it can feel justified. After all, many spiritual teachings emphasize growth, awareness, and transcendence. The problem isn't the pursuit of these things, it's the attachment to them as identity. The ego doesn't disappear, it simply changes costumes. Instead of "I am better because of my achievements," it becomes "I am better because of my awareness." Breaking out of spiritual narcissism doesn't require abandoning spirituality. It requires deepening it. It means becoming willing to question not just the world, but the self that is doing the questioning. It involves humility, not as a performance, but as a genuine recognition that growth is ongoing and that no one fully arrives. It also means reconnecting with ordinary humanity, allowing space for imperfection, doubt, emotion, and vulnerability. Real spiritual maturity tends to look quieter. It shows up as curiosity instead of certainty, compassion instead of correction, presence instead of performance. There's less need to prove anything, less urgency to label experiences as higher or lower. Instead of separating oneself from others, there's a sense of shared experience, a recognition that everyone is navigating their own path at their own pace. In the end, spiritual narcissism is not some rare flaw found in others. It's a tendency that can arise in anyone who seeks meaning and growth. Recognizing it isn't a reason for shame, it's an opportunity for honesty. And that honesty, more than any label or identity, is what keeps the path genuinely open.